Okay, to this short-ish presentation of an introduction to mindful eating, and I'm really grateful that you're here listening to this, and I'm hoping that I'm going to clarify a couple of points around mindful eating, what it is and what it isn't, and the benefits of taking a mindful eating approach to your relationship with food, eating, and maybe even your body, and a few kind of like short, just little tools at the end to give you some practical implications of this approach. So thanks so much. So the whole presentation is about just an introduction to mindful eating. So what we're going to cover is the definition of mindfulness. We're going to look at the definition of mindful eating. And we're really also going to touch about what mindful eating isn't, because that really pisses me off sometimes when mindful eating gets co-opted as a weight loss tool, and the benefits of practicing mindful eating. And also, as I said before, we're going to touch at the end how to bring mindfulness to the table, i.e. how to practice mindful eating in our everyday lives. So then, who am I who is talking to you here for this short webinar? So my name is Lynn Thorstensson. I'm a nutritional therapist. I'm also a food blogger on my blog, Straightforward Nutrition, where I share blogs about mindful eating, our relationship with food, wholehearted living, and also a bunch of recipes to inspire people to cook and eat things that are tasty and fun and quite simple. In my work with my clients, I tend to take a mind-body nutrition approach to health and healing, because I do believe that our mind and body are not two separate entities, but that they're intertwined and interconnected. And I also practice with a personalized nutrition approach and with a stance at health at every size. And if you're new to the health in every size paradigm or concept or approach, whatever way you want to call it, I will put some links on my website that you can find out a bit more what health at every size mean and what it means for as a professional to take this approach to how I work with my clients. So let's get started then with the definition of mindfulness. So there's a lots of definitions, but this is, I suppose, the most commonly used one, and it's from Jon Kabat-Zinn, which is the founder of the MBSR program. And he states, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So then when we move on to mindful eating, what are the definitions of mindful eating? So I think what most people think about when they hear mindful eating is that is a way of chewing slower or eating slower or eating without distraction. But it's really a lot more than that, as you will see as we go through these definitions. But a huge part of it and a huge part of the fundamentals of taking a mindful approach when we're eating is that we use all our senses in both choosing the food to eat and making sure that they're both satisfying and nourishing to your body, or when I'm choosing that are satisfying to my body. And this does feed into a personalized approach to food and eating. So then these definitions of mindful eating that I've taken from the Center for Mindful Eating's website, their statements to just kind of giving us a guideline for what really mindful eating is and isn't. So it's allowing yourself to become aware of the positive and nurturing opportunities that are available through food selection and preparation by respecting your own inner wisdom. It's also acknowledging responses to food. Likes, dislikes are neutral without judgment. And the without judgment piece is really important to remember and quite challenging to practice. It's becoming aware of physical hunger and satiety cues to guide your decisions to begin and end eating. And this is part of what we call within mindful eating, how we cultivate our own inner wisdom. But it's to become more attuned to your physical body's needs, basically. So why then practice mindful eating? So we know, or maybe you've heard, or maybe have tried for yourself numerous times, that diets and dieting doesn't really work. It doesn't give us satisfaction. It doesn't necessarily promote health. It's often restrictive, depriving. It doesn't make us happy. Maybe short term, but usually not long term. So we really need a different approach. And for me, what I found, and there is a growing evidence of research showing the same, that it is really time that we take a mindful approach to nourish our body. So before we move further into this presentation, I really want to touch on what mindful eating isn't. So mindful eating is sometimes co-opted as a weight loss strategy. However, it's really important that mindful eating is not treated as a diet. And we can do this sometimes it's consciously co-opted as a tool in weight management or weight loss programs. And sometimes we can subconsciously start using it as a diet, as replacing rules on trying to only eat when we're hungry and really only stop when we're full, and we are becoming very judgmental of ourselves and our behavior. But remember that mindful eating also takes this non-judgmental approach. And why I find mindful eating is so powerful is that it is a way to create a healthy, dynamic relationship with food and eating. And it is really a way of helping you become the expert on you. So why should we practice mindful eating, apart from that it is a really useful and powerful and profound approach to heal our relationship with food and eating and become more embodied in how we sort of nourish ourselves or how we feed ourselves. The thing is, the mindful eating makes us less reactive and more responsive. So less reactive to external stimuli, less reactive to internal stimuli, and more responsive. So when we're practicing mindfulness and mindful eating, we create a space of choice. Hopefully, as we're practicing, we also become less judging and more curious and compassionate, both towards ourselves, which is hugely important, but also we can grow these skills and we become less judging and more curious and compassionate towards others. And we also become more in tune and responsive to our own body's needs. And that's really a big healing tool or approach, that why it is so useful when our relationship with food and eating is disordered or it's become a bit distorted. So food and eating, and I think what's really important is to remember in this day and age where nutrition information is so readily available, which is brilliant, but it can be also so overwhelming and so confusing, is that nutrition is science, and it's looking at the biochemical pathways and understanding how the food interacts with the body's biochemistry and so on. And it's also a very young science, and there's always new discoveries and new understandings constantly. But that act of eating is a behavior. So we're talking about what we eat, which is the nutrition, and then how and why we eat, which is our behavior. And that they need to be balanced and coexist and kind of connect to each other, that they're not separate. But sometimes we get very caught up in the science and we forget that eating is part of our behavior. So we can use mindful eating as a way of making connections between these two. And it can really help us connect the dots. So the dots between what drives our desire to eat and what drives our food choices. So there is a physiology and a psychology. And we can go a lot deeper into this, but I just wanted in this short presentation kind of, prickle your memory or prick your curiosity is maybe more the right thing to say. And so I'm going to throw this question out and ask if you've ever asked yourself this. So how does the food I eat make me feel, which is the physiology? And this is part of being attuned and being in tune with your body and how your body's sensations and how it speaks to you. And then the psychology pieces. So it goes back to what's driving our food choices. And this is understanding and becoming aware of how my emotions, thoughts, and feelings affect my food choices. Because what we think and feel can definitely affect the type of food we choose to eat. So we call to bring these two pieces together, we call it cultivating our inner wisdom and our outer wisdom. So our inner wisdom then is really learning about to listen to our body's cues and signals. And they're the ones like hunger, fullness, satiety, our energy levels and a need for rest, and our emotional responses that are felt in the body. And if you're already very attuned, this might seem quite obvious to you. But when we tend to live a lot of time in our heads, we might actually be so clued into these subtle signals of hunger and fullness and satiety. And maybe we're pushing through even when our bodies are saying it needs rest and so on. And then we have the outer wisdom, which is usually the knowledge that we have accumulated or learned about what brings positive health benefits. So eating enough vegetables, getting enough protein, exercise and movement, drinking enough water, for example, and rest and sleep. So these are things that, kind of general guidelines that we know are useful to support our health. But then how do we connect our inner wisdom? So this is paying attention to my internal cues and my body's language and signals and signs and stuff, and my outer wisdom, so things that I know that is good for me. So how do I honor my physical needs? Basically be that my outer wisdom being tuned into my inner wisdom. And really there's only one way of doing this, I think, and that is cultivating awareness. And we can do that in so many different ways, but using mindfulness meditation is one way, but also just like starting to notice things, starting to pay attention to even outer sensations. And whatever way, it could be journaling, whatever tool that you find that is useful for cultivating your awareness, bring that. So making a wise choice is really when we bring the inner wisdom and outer wisdom. So what does that look like? So it could be that I notice that I'm hungry, and then from that inner wisdom, so my body is telling me it's time to eat, I can use my outer wisdom to decide what is going to be the best food choice for me at this time, that is satisfying, that is nourishing, and that is going to give me, that is going to, support my hunger. And when we bring the two together, that's what we call making a wise choice. But I think the thing to remember with mindfulness and mindful eating is that we don't just slow down and create space for choice, though this is a big part of it. What we also do is this bringing the quality of attention or attitude of mindfulness to our direct experience of eating and living. So pausing and being more aware, that does create space for choice, but within this awareness, we're bringing this particular quality of attention that is mindfulness, and the quality of mindfulness to our direct experience of eating and living. And these quality of attention are kindness, openness, curiosity, compassion, and non-judgment. So these are the intentions that we're holding in our space of our awareness. And it's really important because I think sometimes we forget that all these qualities are there that we're also bringing to ourselves. And it is many of these that make such a difference to how we act within our direct experience. So then let's move on to some practical tools, how we can use mindfulness or mindful eating in improving our relationship with food and eating and having a more nourishing experience. So mindful pause really creates space for choice. And I think this is so important because we forget that when we are beginning on our journey with full permission to eat, we are still in this kind of reactive, responsive mode. But when we can bring in a pause, we actually create space for choice. So what we're talking about here is a conscious pause to check in with yourself. And within this pause, we might ask a few questions. So what is going on right now? What thoughts, feelings, and emotions are present? What might serve me best in this moment? And what do I really need? So the trigger to remember to pause could be that you notice a desire to reach for food. And before you put the food in your mouth, do remember that though it's the permission to eat is always there, but it could be useful to ask yourself these questions. So what's going on? Is there any thoughts and feelings and emotions that are present? What might serve me best in this moment? It could be the food, it could be different food, it could be something else. And then ask yourself, what do you really need? And I put in here a kind of like, so this is, I don't know if this is a bridge to the mindful pause, making a wise choice, but I really like this quote from Christine Neff, who is one of the leading experts in the field of self-compassion. And it's really about where are our intentions coming from. So she says, a self-critical desire to change comes from a place of fear, and a compassionate desire to change comes from a place of care. And really to ask ourselves, what place are you choosing from? So it's really to, when we're making decisions and we're cultivating our awareness, what place am I coming from? Is this a restrictive place of fear, or is it a kind of a kind, compassionate place of care? And that can guide you might still make the same choice for the food, but it would guide how it makes you feel, if that makes sense. We can also use the tools of reflection and curiosity to cultivate our mindful eating practice. And we can do this through some self-reflection and curious questions like, what do you notice when you, say, reach for the biscuit tin? Or what might happen if you, have breakfast earlier or later? Or what might happen if you bring a snack to work? Or, whatever it is, that you just be curious. And that curiosity can open space for, new experiences and a willingness to try something different. And when we bring curiosity to our experience or to our choices, we might limit the sort of the judgmental inner critical voice of the fear of failure, I think. And then we can also ask ourselves, what did you learn about, making a different choice, creating new habits or new neuronal pathways? And when we're reflective of what are we learning about this without this sort of judgment layer, we can really kind of see, well, this worked, or that didn't work, or I was neutral about that. So really bringing curiosity and reflection to our experience is really useful for our continued learning, I think. And I also want to say that don't forget that mindful eating is a practice. So it's something we do. It's in one sense, maybe we still do look at it as a tool to get us somewhere, but also mindful eating or mindfulness is a practice for us to learning to be with what is. And because it's a practice, Um, it's something that we do that have value to help us cultivate our attunement with eating in our bodies, but it also holds merit simply by practicing it. So when we practice mindfulness, mindful eating, and being present in our moment-to-moment experience, that itself has lots of value and lots of merit. And if you really want to see how mindful your eating is right now, I have included a link to download for a mindful eating checklist, and you can just download the checklist and fill it out and see how mindful or mindless is your eating right now. And before we finish, I'm going to just give you a couple of resources here, and one of my favorite ones, which has loads and loads of and it's probably your best resource for mindful eating, is the Center for Mindful Eating.org, and there's downloads and webinars, free ones and paid ones, and they do a monthly publication with articles, and there is webinars and meditations and loads, and I'm an active member of the Center for Mindful Eating, so I would highly recommend their resources. You can find more on my own website, straightforwardnutrition.com, and also my online program Happy Healthy Me is built around a mindful approach to personal transformation of our relationship with food and eating. So it holds some guided meditations, some affirmations, recipes, journaling exercises, and a lot more. And I've just put a couple of my favorite books here, though I have a whole library with heaps of books in this area. So you can see some of them here. And one of the podcasts that I've had enjoyed lots lately is the Everybody podcast by Daria Matza. But there is heaps more on with people who are interviewing other experts in the areas of mindful eating, health at every size, attuned eating, and so on, and how we kind of cultivate a healthy relationship with food and eating in this kind of diet culture world that we live in. So finally, thank you so much for being with me for this presentation, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to see you again soon, and do please go and visit my website, straightforwardnutrition.com. Thanks so much. And if you're tired of the endless dieting treadmill and ready for some healing, then feel free to drop me an email for a free, no obligations consultation to see where you're at. And my email is lynn@straightforwardnutrition.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.